For 6 years, everyone in the mansion had tried to make little Amelia speak. Doctors failed, therapists failed, even her billionaire father had stopped asking questions. Amelia was deaf, but that wasn't the only mystery. She never responded to anyone, not with words, not with gestures, not even with eye contact. Then one rainy evening, a single dad working as the mansion's janitor noticed something strange. Instead of speaking to Amelia, he turned off the lights. Then he began tapping his mop against the floor. 3 slow taps. Amelia suddenly froze. She looked directly at him, and for the first time in 6 years, she answered. What the janitor discovered next would make her billionaire father realize that his daughter's silence had never been the real problem. For 6 years, everyone in the mansion had tried to make little Amelia speak. Doctors had examined her. Therapists had worked with her. Teachers had brought her special exercises. And her billionaire father had spent millions searching for someone who could explain why his daughter seemed to live inside a world no one else could enter. But Amelia never responded. Not to her father. Not to the doctors. Not to the expensive therapists. Not even to the people who had loved her since she was born. Then one rainy evening, a single dad working as a janitor noticed something everyone else had missed. Instead of calling Amelia's name, he turned off the lights. Then he tapped his mop against the marble floor. 3 slow taps. Amelia stopped walking. She turned around, and for the first time in 6 years, she looked directly at someone. The janitor froze. He tapped twice. Amelia answered once. Daniel slowly put down his mop. He had no idea that those tiny sounds were about to uncover a secret buried inside one of the richest families in the city. And he certainly didn't know that Amelia had been trying to tell someone the truth for years. The Hawthorne mansion stood on a hill overlooking the city. It was enormous. 20 bedrooms, a private theater, an indoor swimming pool, a glass elevator, a garden larger than most public parks, and more security cameras than Daniel could count. But despite all that wealth, the house always felt strangely quiet. Daniel Reed noticed it during his first week working there. He had taken the janitor position because he needed steady money for his 7-year-old daughter, Lily. His wife had died 3 years earlier after a sudden illness. Since then, Daniel had become everything for Lily. Father, mother, cook, homework helper, driver, and the person who stayed awake whenever she had a nightmare. The Hawthorne mansion paid better than most cleaning jobs, so Daniel couldn't afford to complain. Every morning, he arrived at 7. Every evening, he left after Lily had already fallen asleep. But there was one person in the mansion Daniel couldn't stop thinking about. Amelia Hawthorne, Richard Hawthorne's only child, 9 years old, deaf since birth, and, according to everyone, completely withdrawn. Daniel first saw her on his 4th day. She was sitting alone near the giant library window. A book was open in front of her. She wasn't reading. She was drawing. Daniel watched from a distance. A woman named Mrs. Carter, Amelia's private tutor, walked into the room. She waved her hands. Amelia didn't look up. Mrs. Carter walked closer and tapped Amelia's shoulder. Amelia immediately pulled away. The tutor sighed. She does this all the time, she told Daniel. Daniel looked at the girl. She understands sign language? Sometimes. Sometimes? Mrs. Carter shook her head. No one knows what she understands anymore. Then she walked away. Daniel looked at Amelia again. There was something about the girl's face that bothered him. She didn't look empty. She looked trapped. That afternoon, Daniel was cleaning the hallway when Amelia suddenly dropped her pencil. It rolled toward him. Daniel picked it up. He walked toward her. Instead of speaking, he crouched down and placed the pencil on the floor between them. Amelia stared at it. Daniel pointed at himself, then at the pencil. He shrugged. Amelia looked at him for several seconds. Then she picked up the pencil. Daniel smiled. He didn't know why, but Amelia looked at his smile and almost smiled back. Almost. A few days later, Daniel was cleaning the main hall during a thunderstorm. Lightning flashed outside. The mansion's lights flickered. Amelia appeared at the end of the hallway. She looked frightened. Daniel noticed immediately. He put down his cleaning supplies. Amelia couldn't hear the thunder, but she could feel the vibrations. The storm was shaking the glass windows. Daniel remembered something his daughter had once told him. Sometimes people don't need us to talk louder, Dad. They need us to understand differently. So Daniel tried something. He walked to the marble floor. He tapped the handle of his mop against it. Tap, tap, tap. Amelia stopped. Her eyes moved toward him. Daniel tapped twice. Tap, tap. Amelia stared. Then she slowly lifted her foot. She tapped the floor once. Daniel's heart skipped. He repeated the pattern. 3 taps. Amelia answered once. 2 taps. She answered twice. Daniel smiled. It wasn't random. She was responding. He sat on the floor. Amelia sat across from him. For 20 minutes, neither spoke. They communicated through patterns. 3 taps. 1 tap. 2 taps. Then something unexpected happened. Amelia pointed toward the ceiling. Daniel looked up. Nothing. She pointed again. Then she touched her wrist. Daniel didn't understand. Amelia became frustrated. She grabbed a piece of paper. She drew a clock. Then she drew the number 8. Daniel stared at the picture. 8. 8 o'clock. What happens at 8? He asked quietly. Amelia couldn't hear him. But she watched his lips. Then she drew another picture. A door. And a man. Daniel's expression changed. She drew the man again. Then she crossed him out. Daniel suddenly felt uneasy. Before he could understand, footsteps approached. Richard Hawthorne entered the hallway. He stopped when he saw Amelia sitting on the floor with Daniel. His face hardened. What are you doing? Daniel stood immediately. Sir, I was just. Richard walked toward his daughter. Amelia. She immediately turned away. Richard's jaw tightened. She doesn't respond to people. Daniel hesitated. Actually, sir. Richard looked at him. What? Daniel pointed at the floor. She was responding to me. Richard stared at his daughter. Amelia didn't move. Then Richard laughed bitterly. She's deaf, Daniel. She doesn't respond. Daniel looked at him. She just did. Richard's smile disappeared. The next morning, Daniel was called into Richard's office. The billionaire stood behind a desk overlooking the city. You've been here less than 2 weeks. Yes, sir. And you've already decided that every doctor and therapist I've hired is wrong? No, sir. Then what exactly are you saying? Daniel took a breath. I'm saying your daughter communicates differently. Richard's eyes narrowed. You think I don't know that? Daniel stayed quiet. Richard walked toward the window. I've spent 6 years trying to help her. His voice cracked. My wife died when Amelia was 3. Daniel said nothing. After that, Amelia stopped responding completely. Richard looked down. I thought she blamed me. You don't know that. I know enough. Daniel looked at him. Maybe she wasn't rejecting you. Richard turned around. Then what was she doing? Trying to tell you something. The room went silent. Richard's expression changed. Don't say things you can't prove. Daniel nodded. You're right. He walked toward the door. Then stopped. Sir? Richard looked at him. Your daughter drew a clock yesterday. What time? 8. Richard's face suddenly became pale. 8? Yes. Richard stared at Daniel. Then he said something Daniel never expected. Don't ever mention that to Amelia again. Daniel frowned. Why? Because I said so. That evening, Daniel stayed late. At exactly 7:45, he was cleaning the west hallway when he noticed Amelia standing there. She was watching the clock. 7:47. She tapped her foot. 7:48. Daniel approached. She immediately pointed toward the locked door at the end of the hallway. Daniel knew that door. No one was allowed inside. The housekeeper had once told him it was an old storage room. But Amelia kept pointing at it. Then she drew the same picture. A man. A door. The number 8. Daniel checked the hallway. No one was there. He crouched beside Amelia. What is inside? She pointed. Then she shook her head. She pointed toward the stairs. Then back toward the door. Daniel understood only one thing. She was afraid. At 7:59, the mansion's lights suddenly went out. Emergency lights turned on. Daniel heard footsteps. Someone was coming. Amelia grabbed his sleeve. Daniel looked toward the hallway. A tall man appeared. Victor Lane. Richard's chief financial officer. Victor stopped when he saw Daniel. His expression changed. What are you doing here? Daniel stood. Cleaning. Victor looked at Amelia. Then at the locked door. Go back to your room, Amelia. She didn't move. Victor stepped closer. Daniel noticed Amelia trembling. Then Victor said something that made Daniel's stomach tighten. Your father told you never to come here. Amelia looked at Daniel. Then she tapped the floor. 3 times. Daniel answered once. Victor's face suddenly became tense. You need to stop that. Daniel stared at him. Victor walked away. Amelia kept looking at Daniel. Then she pointed at Victor's back. She drew the number 8. Daniel finally understood. 8 o'clock. Victor. The locked room. Something happened here every night. Daniel knew he was risking his job. But he couldn't ignore Amelia. He started paying attention. At 8 o'clock every evening, Victor entered the west hallway. Sometimes he stayed 5 minutes. Sometimes 20. He always carried a black leather briefcase. And every time Amelia saw him, she became frightened. Daniel didn't know what Victor was doing. But he knew something was wrong. One night, Daniel waited until Victor left. Then he entered the hallway. The locked door was still there. He examined the handle. It had recently been replaced. That made no sense for a storage room. He noticed a small security camera above the door. Then he noticed something else. The camera's red light wasn't on. Someone had disabled it. Daniel took out his phone. He photographed the camera. The next morning, he showed the picture to a security employee he trusted. That camera hasn't worked in months, the employee said. Who controls it? Victor. Daniel's suspicion grew. That evening, Amelia handed him another drawing. This time, it showed a little girl. A woman. And a black box. The woman was crossed out. Daniel thought about Richard's wife. Amelia's mother. Was the drawing connected to her? Daniel asked Richard about it. The billionaire became furious. My wife has nothing to do with this. Daniel looked at him. Then why does Amelia keep drawing her? Richard's face softened. For the first time, Daniel saw something beyond anger. He saw fear. Richard sat down. My wife, Eleanor, discovered something before she died. What? Richard stared at his hands. Financial irregularities. Daniel waited. She believed someone inside the company was stealing money. Victor? Richard didn't answer. Eleanor wanted to confront the board. What happened? Richard's voice became quiet. She died before she could. Daniel's stomach tightened. Was her death investigated? Of course. And? Car accident. Silence filled the room. Daniel looked toward the window. Sir? Richard looked up. What? Maybe Amelia saw something. Richard's face went completely still. That night, Daniel sat with Amelia in the library. He placed a notebook between them. He drew simple pictures. House. Door. Man. Money. Amelia watched. Then she took the pencil. She drew a car. Then a road. Then her mother. Then a black car. Daniel stared at the picture. Was your mother in this car? Amelia nodded. Then she drew Victor. Daniel's heart pounded. She drew him standing beside the car. Then she drew a second person. A man with a hat. Daniel didn't recognize him. Amelia crossed out Victor. Then she drew a question mark. Daniel suddenly realized something. Amelia wasn't saying Victor killed her mother. She was saying Victor knew something. Maybe he had been there. Maybe he had seen something. Maybe he was protecting someone. Daniel asked Amelia to draw what happened next. She drew a phone. Then a locked door. Then her father. Richard. She drew him crying. Then she drew herself hiding behind a staircase. Daniel's heart broke. She had been there. She had seen something. But she had never been able to tell anyone. Not because she didn't want to. Because nobody had learned how to listen. Daniel needed evidence. He couldn't accuse Victor based on drawings. So he searched the mansion's old security archives. With the help of a security guard, he found footage from 6 years earlier. The night of Eleanor's accident. Most files were corrupted. But one camera had survived. It showed the driveway. 11:42 p.m. Eleanor's car left the mansion. A few minutes later, another car followed. Black sedan. No license plate visible. Daniel zoomed in. The driver wasn't Victor. It was someone else. Daniel froze. He recognized the man. It was Richard's younger brother, Thomas. Richard's brother had disappeared from the company years earlier. Why? Daniel kept watching. The black sedan followed Eleanor. Then the footage ended. Daniel felt sick. He immediately went to Richard. Your brother was following Eleanor the night she died. Richard stared at the screen. No. It's right there. Richard shook his head. Thomas left the country years ago. He didn't. Richard watched the footage again. His face changed. Then he whispered. Why would he follow her? Daniel didn't answer. Suddenly, the office door opened. Victor walked in. He saw the screen. His face went pale. Then he locked the door. Daniel stood. What are you doing? Victor stared at Richard. You weren't supposed to find this. Richard stepped forward. Find what? Victor's eyes filled with regret. Your brother didn't disappear. Richard's voice became cold. Where is he? Victor looked toward Daniel. Alive. Victor finally confessed. Thomas had been stealing money from Hawthorne Industries. Millions. Eleanor discovered the fraud. She confronted him. Thomas panicked. He followed her car. But he didn't cause the accident. Another vehicle did. Thomas had witnessed it. And instead of helping, he fled. Victor had discovered the truth afterward. But he was afraid. Thomas threatened him. He had evidence that could destroy Victor's career too. So Victor stayed silent. Richard looked devastated. My wife died because of them. Victor lowered his head. I was a coward. Daniel asked. Why was Amelia afraid of you? Victor looked at Amelia. Because she saw me talking to Thomas after the accident. Richard looked at his daughter. She saw you? Victor nodded. She was hiding behind the stairs when I came back that night. Daniel suddenly understood. Amelia had seen everything. She saw Victor talking to Thomas. She saw the black car. She saw her father crying. She had been trying to tell them. For 6 years. And everyone had mistaken her silence for emptiness. But there was still one problem. Thomas was alive. And if he knew the evidence had been found, he might disappear again. Richard contacted the police. Victor agreed to testify. The old security footage was preserved. But Thomas had vanished. Daniel returned home that night exhausted. Lily was waiting for him. Dad? Daniel smiled. Hey, sweetheart. She hugged him. Then she noticed his worried face. What's wrong? Daniel sat beside her. Sometimes people can be trying to tell us something without using words. Lily smiled. Like Amelia? Daniel looked at her. How did you know? You talk about her. Daniel laughed softly. Lily thought for a moment. Maybe she doesn't need someone to make her talk. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Maybe she just needs someone to listen. 3 days later, Richard held a family meeting. Police were present. Lawyers were present. Victor was there. Amelia sat beside Daniel. Thomas still hadn't been found. Then Amelia suddenly stood. She walked toward the table. Everyone watched. She picked up a pen. She wrote a number. A phone number. Richard stared. What's this? Daniel looked at the number. He recognized the area code. It belonged to a town 2 hours away. The police traced it. It was registered to Thomas. They called. No answer. But an officer noticed something. The number had been used recently. They traced the location. Thomas was found that evening. He had been living under another name. When police confronted him with the evidence, he finally confessed. He hadn't caused the accident. But he had followed Eleanor. He had stolen from the company. And he had spent 6 years hiding because he knew Eleanor had discovered him. Richard broke down. Not because of the money. Because his wife had died knowing something terrible. And his daughter had been carrying the memory alone. Richard walked toward Amelia. He knelt. For the first time in years, he didn't ask her to speak. He didn't demand an answer. He simply held out his hands. Amelia looked at him. Then she stepped forward. She placed her small hand in his. Richard began to cry. I'm sorry. Amelia watched his face. Then she tapped his hand. Once. Twice. 3 times. Daniel smiled. Richard looked at Daniel. What does that mean? Daniel shook his head. I don't know. Amelia smiled faintly. Then she tapped again. 3 times. Richard laughed through his tears. Can you teach me? Amelia nodded. A month later, Daniel submitted his resignation. Richard refused to accept it. You don't have to leave. Daniel smiled. I have a daughter waiting for me. Richard nodded. Then bring her here. Daniel laughed. She'd probably destroy your mansion. Richard smiled. I think Amelia would like that. Before Daniel left, Amelia came running into the hallway. She grabbed his hand. Daniel crouched. What is it? She pointed toward the floor. 3 taps. Daniel answered. 3 taps. Amelia smiled. Then she hugged him. It was the first time she had ever hugged him. Daniel closed his eyes. He whispered. You don't have to thank me. Amelia pulled away. She pointed toward the door. Then toward him. Then toward herself. Daniel understood. She wasn't saying goodbye. She was saying, come back. Daniel smiled. I will. 6 months later, Hawthorne Industries recovered the stolen money. Thomas went to prison. Victor testified and accepted responsibility for his silence. Richard completely changed. He stopped treating Amelia like a problem that needed to be fixed. Instead, he learned her language. He learned sign language. He learned her tapping patterns. He learned how she communicated through movement, expressions, and vibrations. And Amelia changed too. She started going to school. She made friends. She began drawing again. But the biggest change happened one afternoon when Richard walked into the library. Amelia was sitting at the window. She looked up. She signed something. Richard smiled. I understand. She signed again. Richard laughed. I understand that too. From the doorway, Daniel watched them. He had come to visit with Lily. Lily ran toward Amelia. The 2 girls hugged. Daniel looked at Richard. She's doing well. Richard nodded. Because of you. Daniel shook his head. No. He looked at Amelia. Because you finally listened to her. Richard looked at his daughter. Then at Daniel. And for the first time, the billionaire understood something money had never taught him. You can build the biggest house in the city. You can hire the best doctors. You can buy the most expensive technology. But none of it matters if you never stop long enough to understand the person standing in front of you. Amelia had never been empty. She had never been broken. She had never been incapable of communicating. Everyone else had simply been speaking a language she didn't use. And the person who finally understood her wasn't a doctor, wasn't a therapist, wasn't a billionaire. He was a single dad with a mop who decided to listen differently. And sometimes, that's all someone needs. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss our next emotional story. And don't forget to tell us in the comments, where are you watching from?